Aloha everybody, Devin Tryan here from Pineapple Real Estate Group, and today we're covering rent versus buy and why you might be throwing away a lot of money. Here's when you should rent. If you're living in an area or the same city for less than 2 years, it's not gonna make sense to buy. If your income is inconsistent and you can't prove that to the bank, they're not gonna give you a loan. Or if your credit score is below 580 or you've had a bankruptcy within the last 5 years, make sure we're renting at that time until we can save up enough money or build up that credit. Here's when you should buy. If you're gonna live in the same city or the same place for at least 2 years, it really makes sense for you at that point to invest or to buy your own property. Here's why. You're gonna be paying rent anyway, and when you move out and you're not paying rent, your landlord gets to keep all of that money. They don't give you any of it back. Whereas when you own, you're actually gonna be paying down your mortgage every single month. So if you buy a house for $500,000, $500,000, and then every month you're making payments, after 2 years you'll owe about $475,000, which means you're gonna actually have $25,000 of equity. That's the amount of money you own in the house. Now with that equity, you can actually go to sell it and you get to keep all of that money. So after 4 years of owning this same property, living there, paying almost the same amount of mortgage as you would in rent, you actually will have about $50,000 of equity. So for example, I had a couple clients who they really wanted to buy a single family home. However, if you know on Oahu, a single family home is almost $700,000 to $800,000. It wasn't quite in the budget for them as their first home because most people's first property isn't actually their favorite or the best one. So what we did for them was they bought a townhome that really fit their needs. 3 years later, this last December actually, we sold it and they actually made a profit of $80,000. They paid down their mortgage by almost $40,000 because they made all their payments on time, and then that property, that townhome value went up by quite a bit. So when they sold it, they made $80,000, and then that's the amount of money they used as a down payment on a larger property. So let's go over some myths about actually buying properties. Number one is everybody thinks you need 10 or 20% down. That's not the case. Through first-time homebuyer programs, FHA, USDA, we have a ton of clients that will get into a house, a really nice place, for 0% down, meaning they don't need a down payment. If the property is $600,000, they don't have to come to the table with that down payment. And even for things like closing costs or closing fees, a lot of times we can write those into the contract. I've had a ton of clients that have gotten into their very first home for less than $1,000 cash. It doesn't have to be that hard to get into it, so that's a really common myth. Second thing is everybody thinks you need a really good credit score. The higher your credit score, the better your interest rate is going to be. However, here's the thing, minimum credit score for an FHA loan is 580. If you can beat 580, we can get you a loan for at least $400,000 for something like that, as long as your income is good. Which brings me to the next myth is a lot of people think you need at least 2 years of credit history or tax returns or pay stubs from your current job. That's not always the case. We have tons of clients who have, especially in that first responder position, as long as you have a title or a guarantee that you have some type of job, typically we can even qualify you guys for a loan too. It doesn't have to be hard. We just have to know which steps to take and what type of income you have so we can find you that good loan. However, buying a house does have some cons. There is always a downside. You have to do the repairs. You need to make sure you're setting aside budget for things like a roof or plumbing or upgrades. You want to make sure that you spend a little bit extra money, get yourself a home warranty so that way when something breaks, you're covered. You need to set aside a little bit of money for that. Second thing that's kind of a con about buying a house is you're not as transient anymore. If you need to sell the house and go somewhere else, it could take you 1 to 3 months depending on the market to get that sold. So knowing ahead of time where you're going to live is a really good thing. And especially in a market like Hawaii where the prices are always going up, you want to make sure that if you're going to spend, let's say $3,000 a month on rent, that's $36,000 a year, you should at least be putting it into a mortgage. So when you do move, you get to keep all that money or a good portion of it that you put in. With that being said, if you guys have any questions about buying, selling, renting, investing, however any of this works, feel free to reach out to us. We would be stoked to hear from you. Aloha.